Hi, I'm Brooke Henry, and I got a harebrained idea tonight to do something creative and to come down to my studio. I bought a set of cheap notebooks that all look exactly the same. Now, I'm going to be using them for note taking and brainstorming and all of those good things. But the problem is I can't differentiate one from another. So I got this idea that I could take the notebook, deconstruct it, turn it into something that feels a little bit more handmade and personal, and add some of my artistic touch to it. It is late at night and I was going to turn in early. I guess it's not super late, but I was going to go to bed early tonight. But I got this idea, and honestly, I haven't been feeling super creative lately. And so instead of telling myself to do it another time, which maybe is the logical thing to do, I said, go down, start on the project, and see how it goes. When you get those feelings of creativity, when you've kind of been in a rut for a little while, take advantage of it. Run with it and see where it takes you. And I bet it will take you someplace amazing. I have a little bit of a plan in mind, but honestly, I've only thought about this for about 5 minutes and decided to come do it. And so I want to take you along on the adventure, and let's see how this turns out. My first step to give this journal a little bit of a makeover is I'm going to deconstruct it. So first I'm going to binder clip my pages together just to keep everything nice and secure. And next up, I'll take these stitches that are already in place and take them out. This is a really simple binding method, just a pamphlet stitch. And so I'm not worried about putting this back together. But if this is something that makes you a little uncomfortable or you don't want to take the time to do it, you can still do a really fun decorated cover without totally deconstructing it. For me, I wanted those inside pages to be nice and clean. I'm not going to necessarily use this for art. It's going to be for note taking. And so I want to keep the inside just like I bought it in the first place. I'm going to do a quick little labeling of the back on the cover and on the pages. This is just going to help me put it back together easier. Technically, it shouldn't matter because everything is the same size, but those holes that have already been punched, I don't want to have to re-punch them. And this is just going to ensure that everything lines up nice and neat. You could use a piece of tape to signify each side. Lots of different ways you can mark that, but just know for yourself, it might be easier if you do think about that ahead of time. Now, when they bound this, they didn't do it by hand. These are just kind of cheap notebooks from Amazon, and some of the holes are really close to the edges. When it's all put together, it's just fine, but doing this deconstructing step, it does kind of bring that to light a little bit. So I'm just taking a little piece of strong tape, putting it on the top. I could do that on the top and bottom if I wanted to, but for me on this one, the top had a hole that was really close to the edge, and so I'm just reinforcing that a little bit. Next up, I'm getting my paints ready. I just have a little piece of paper palette here, nothing fancy, and I knew what kind of color scheme I wanted up front. I wanted some of those pinks and oranges. I want this to feel really nice and vibrant. Now I start putting on my paints here, and again, don't have too much of a plan, just want to get some of that color down. And on the craft paper, it wasn't as vibrant as I hoped. So it's time to pivot and think, what could we do to make this a little bit more vibrant? I thought, well, you could cover it with another piece of paper, but that's kind of taking away from redoing the cover. I could have just done that on another piece. And so I thought, well, let's white gesso this and spread it out. I got way too much paint going on here, so I'm wiping some of that off on another piece and just giving it a nice coat. I'm going to have to let this dry before I come back and add paint on top of it. But what this is going to do is just allow those colors that I chose to really show forth in all of their vibrantness. And so that's an easy thing to do. So you might want to just plan to do that up front if you're using a craft notebook like I am, or any other color for that matter. So after that was dry, I'm coming back in and I have the same plan of action that I had before. I'm starting out with my paints and kind of just putting them down in a splotchy painterly way. I'm allowing myself to have a lot of fun with this step, not take it too seriously, not have too much of a plan, just seeing how those colors are interacting with each other. Now I have some pinks and some oranges here, so I'm starting out with one colorway, and then I'm going to come back in with the other and see how those mix together on the edges. The orange had a little bit of time to dry, so we are mixing, but if you want a color to really show forth in its pure form, you're going to want to let that dry in between. You can see when I added that neon pink, it mixed with the paint that was already in place. And I like that look, but I'll come back later in and make sure I can get the vibrant look that I'm wanting. So at this stage, I'm just letting things blend how they want to blend, adding in my different colors, making sure that I like the overall composition and balance. Of course, this will be folded in half once it's in use, but knowing me, I always like to think about the overall composition of the piece and not just one side or the other. I'll be trying to link all my supplies in the description below, so if you have questions about those, check there first, and if not, you can always ask in the comments and I'll make sure to get back to you. I'm being real loose with my paintbrush and kind of just feathering on some of that paint, deciding if I'm liking the look, the direction that it's going so far. Things are blending a little bit too much, and so I'm trying to come in with another color. Now that one that I added is a little bit too earthy tones for the look that I was going for. I love that color, but my original intention was for a really vibrant fun. So I took off that paint while it was still wet and coming back in with some more of those truly vibrant tones. Sometimes the best thing that you can do if you're feeling like everything is just blending too much is take a moment and hit it with the heat gun, let it dry, or just let it naturally dry. I've done that here. Now I'm going to come back in with another layer. This is nice how it is, but it's just not giving me that punch that I was hoping for. And so by coming back in with another layer, it's going to make it a little bit more opaque. It doesn't look like I'm trying to cover something. I want this to be kind of a work of art all on its own, not like it was a rush cover-up job. And so my way of doing that now is adding in that second layer. I really like how that looked when I put the neon pink, and so I knew that was a direction that I wanted to go in. It fit more with my original vision of the colors and everything that I wanted to use. So I'm going to continue on here and just get this into a place that I'm happy with before I bring it to the next step. You could do just the paint on your cover and it would be awesome and show-stopping, but I love to add texture in anything that I'm doing. And so I'm going to continue on with this painting and then I'll come back in with some collage and texture. I've continued adding layer after layer of paint, letting things dry when I want more vibrancy, and coming back until I was happy with it. Now, honestly, I would be really happy with this cover just as it is right now and rebind it back together, and I think that would be amazing. I'm going to take it a step further, add a little bit more texture and dimension. Here, I am just repoking those holes gently before I go to the next step. This is not necessary at this point. I will have to do it a little bit again later in some sections, just because I'll be adding some collage over that spine area, but this will help you a little bit later on, so you're not having to dig for those holes with your needle as you rebind. Just taking that moment here to make it a little bit easier on myself down the road. At this point, I'm going to start digging through my stash, pulling out things that inspire me in the same colorway, ways that I can add dimension to this. So I love to have elements pre-made ahead of time so that it's super easy to add to whatever project I'm working on. I like to have papers done in multiple colorways and just sitting waiting for use down the road. When I'm working on something like this, I don't want to then have to stop and create papers for collage. You don't always know what you're going to want to use when it comes to this stage. So having a stash that's easy to pull from makes it way easier. It's less decision fatigue, I think, because you can just pull from the materials that you already have on hand. A lot of times when I'm searching through my stuff, I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. And so this just helps alleviate some of that. It makes it easier on me. So I pulled out some little stitching clusters. I have some fabric or some paper that I've done some mark making on. The transparent one is done on deli paper, and that was just with a stencil. So mark make papers are one of my favorite ways to be in the studio even when I'm not feeling 100% creative. It helps me just to get in the act of doing something and making a really useful supply in the process. So I'm taking some of these and I gathered some black and whites as well. I love the look of bold black and whites with vibrant colors. I think it just makes the colors pop even more, and bold black and whites are always so graphic, so they're a go-to for me all the time. I'm doing a little bit of collage on this. Now, I love the way that the background turned out. So my intention here is not to totally cover this background. If that was the case, then I would have just left this as the craft color cover to begin with and done a totally collage cover, which I think would be a really great option as well. But here, my intention with the collage is just to add to what I've already done, to make those sections of the paint stand out even more, and to give your eye a little bit of a focal point, leading the eye to a place where it knows it's supposed to rest. That focal point is kind of the feature of the journal, and it's something that you can lay your eyes on longer and just appreciate it. So I'm playing around with the different papers that I pulled. I don't have too much of a plan. I didn't have these papers picked out ahead of time, knowing exactly what I'm going to do. So don't let that be a factor in stopping you from creating in the first place. My personality, I like to know exactly how something is going to turn out, especially if I do it on camera. But a big challenge that I have given myself, especially for posting here on YouTube, is just to go with it, explore, see what happens. And I think it helps all of us learn in the process. If we have such a concrete plan from the beginning, it doesn't allow room for true innovation and experimentation. I love creative problem solving where you come and you kind of hit a roadblock and then you have to think about, okay, how am I going to go through this, get around it, and adapt and try something new. The new things that we try and experiment with are oftentimes become my favorite methods in the future. So Don't let the lack of a full thought out plan stop you from creating in the first place. So I'm just continuing to play around here. I'm grabbing from those papers that I already had and letting some of those vibrant areas of the cover stick out. I have this little piece that was stitched with just straight stitching is super simple. It's on just a piece of cotton fabric. And these little pieces made ahead of time make it so much easier to put on my journal. Instead of stopping now and having such a plan of knowing I wanted a piece of white fabric with orange stitching, I was able just to pull it from my stash. I love to do fabric collage just like I love to do paper collage, and I like to think about them in very similar ways. I think if you're not used to working with fabric, it can be a little bit intimidating, but just start thinking about it a little bit like you do paper, and we're just going to layer things up and get a pleasing composition to the eye, making sure that we still have negative space so that your eye has spots to rest. This can be in the form of white or lighter colors, but it can also be in places that have less of a pattern going on. It doesn't always just have to be white blank space that was untouched. Sometimes we can create a really busy background and then come back in and add in that negative space, and that allows the eye a place to rest, and it's more pleasing that way. So I'm just working on this little cluster that's going to go on to my cover and getting it to a place that I'm relatively happy with it. And now I'm thinking about how I can bring some of those elements from the front onto the back. I love mark making on deli paper because of its translucent nature. So when I put this down, essentially you can see everything that's going on behind it. It allows to have more layers and depth in your work because it's not just a piece of paper plopped on top. It really integrates in with the background and everything going on around it. I'm going to take a moment and flip this around and work on the back a little bit. Sometimes I do work on that whole thing at once, like when I was doing the painting stage. At this stage, it's a little bit overwhelming to think about the whole thing at once. So for me, it helped to have that piece that went from the front to the back. And now I'm going to turn it over and just work on that back section. I want to bring in some of the same elements that I worked on in the front, and that's just going to bring cohesiveness to the whole thing. So I like to do what I call asymmetrical balance, and that's not necessarily doing the exact same thing on the front as I do on the back, or when I'm working on a journal spread, the same thing on the left as on the right side. What this more means in my mind is we're just bringing in some of those same elements. It could be bringing in the same colors, which on this one, we have that. The whole thing is the same colors. It can be bringing in the same paper on both sides, but using it in different ways, using the same shapes on both sides. It could be different sizes of that shape, but that repetition is going to bring cohesion across the whole thing. So just because things are not perfectly symmetrical does not mean that they don't feel symmetrical in our minds because of the overall balance and composition of the piece. I'm just gluing these down step by step. The brayer is a really nice, easy tool to use on something like this to make sure that your glue is going all the way to the edges, especially on a piece like this. This notebook is going to get handled quite a bit. It's not going to just sit on the shelf. I do plan on using it for note taking and things like that. And so I want this to be secure. I don't want to have to constantly be fixing it or re-gluing things. And so I want to make sure that I am using a nice amount of glue on each piece to get it all the way out to those corners and the edges. Another really nice adhesive that you could use on something like this is a heavy gel matte or even a matte medium. When it comes to heavier pieces, I like that heavy gel matte just because it adds it's just stronger, and I really like the not texture of it, but the consistency of it. It's not super thin like the matte medium is. It just has a little bit more substance to it. I really like it, especially if I'm going to be using an adhesive for my fabrics with the collage. Oftentimes I'll reinforce whatever fabrics I put down with my sewing machine, but if that's not an option for you, then for sure think about a stronger adhesive like Heavy Gel Matte. Fabri-Tac also works pretty well when you're working with fabrics and collage, things like that. But Heavy Gel Matte, you can scoop it out with almost like a spatula, and that makes it easier to use, in my opinion. So one of the things about collage when I'm adding it over a piece is I never want it to feel like it's just plopped on top as an afterthought. And I don't know if everyone feels that way, but for me, it feels a little out of place when it's just plopped on top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring some of that first background layer that we did. In this case, it's the paint, and I'm going to bring some of that over the top. So this almost looks like a piece of it was ripped away and you can see through to the collage rather than the collage being a total afterthought. This is Heavy Gel Matte that I'm using right here to adhere this piece of fabric to each other, just a little bit more secure for me. Glue would work just fine in this instance, but since the fabric is a little bit different consistency than paper, something a little bit stronger is nice. Now I'm going to do like what I said with my sewing machine. I am going to use it to secure this just a little bit further. If this notebook gets brought in and out of a bag or just handled a lot, it's easy for things to come apart. So I am you can see there, I did a little bit of just one straight line of stitching back and forth. And the way that I did it is, of course, you can see it on the inside cover here, but you're not actually going to even see that on the outside cover. You can see I pulled back that hand stitching part and stitched underneath of it. And now I'm just adding back in some of that Heavy Gel Matte to cover that spot, and then any excess that's sticking up, because of course that stitching is not over the whole base of that piece, it's just one straight line. I'm going to use that Heavy Gel Matte to put that down. I'm using just a palette knife here, and that just makes it easier. I don't have to get my fingers all dirty, anything like that. And then I went around the edges with my sewing machine a couple times. I love the texture that adds. It's super simple, but it's just a little bit of added something, and I think it finishes off the cover really well. I love that added touch. You can leave your threads hanging loose or tie them off. Since this is a notebook, I did trim them a little bit more. And then something that I like to add on mine is my label that has my name on it, and that's just a fun little added touch. You definitely don't have to do that. I printed mine out on a piece of fabric paper. You can also use it to print out pictures and things like that. I use it just for my labels. It's an easy way at home that I can print those out. I'm backing that with a piece of just fun patterned fabric. I am using my glue stick to put this down, but it's just kind of a temporary hold because I will go around with my sewing machine and just secure that in place a little bit better. Other times I put my labels on the inside or just sign it on the inside. It's kind of fun to do that, to look back on. You can see with that neon thread that I stitched through. And for me, I don't mind the look of the stitching on the inside either. If that's something that bothers you, you could cover it with tape or a piece of paper. For me, it just all adds to that texture and dimension. So in those middle spaces that the fabric did cover that spine, I am repoking those holes a little bit. Even though it's that translucent deli paper, I still need to repoke the holes so that they're easier to see and easier to get my needle through. Okay, so now it's time to put this all back together. I'm actually using some fishing line here. You definitely don't have to, but I have it in this fun yellow color and it's nice and strong. And so I think it's a great option to use. Might as well. I have it on hand. The other great options would be you could even use just embroidery thread, regular thread, multiple layers of it. Oftentimes when I'm doing my handmade art journals, I used waxed thread, but these are really small holes, and so I wanted something nice and thin. The fishing line is awesome because it's going to be super strong, and I don't have to worry about this at all. Okay, so now I made sure to line up my back, with the back. So this is all going in the right way. Remember at the beginning, we did label the front or the back of the pages and the back of the cover. Everything is going to line back up now. And now I'm just going to do a simple pamphlet stitch to put this all back together. If you don't know how to do a pamphlet stitch, I suggest just a simple YouTube search, and there's lots of awesome videos out there. I'm keeping this nice and simple. I'm not trying to do anything fancy with the stitching. The other option that I considered is actually just taking this to my sewing machine and stitching it. I decided that I didn't want to do that. I don't want to have to fussy around too much with getting all those holes to line up. And so I'm just doing it by hand. The holes are already there for me, so it's not like I have to take the time to even poke those. And so that's why the pamphlet stitch by hand is a really great option. So I went ahead and did all that. Again, a simple YouTube search. There's amazing videos out there to show you how to do that. With this one and how light the thread was, it didn't show very well on camera, so I won't put you through that. But this is a great option to make your notebook a little bit more unique, a little bit more you. The other thing is this would make amazing gifts. I got these notebooks in a pack of 12, I think, for a really low price. And how amazing would this gift be? A lot of times I put like a cute little binder clip on it that I've embellished to keep it all, you know, nice together. There's a lot of fun things here, and I use a lot of different notebooks for different subjects, and so this is a really great way to keep them all separate. I can grab them without having to look on the inside to see what's in there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope that you enjoyed this. I'll be posting more videos on altered notebooks soon, and I will see you all next time. Have a good one.